Coming up today, responding to Pyongyang's latest nuclear missile threats, the United States calls on North Korea to refrain from irresponsible provocations. Stricken by infighting, South Korea's main opposition party is set to hold a meeting to decide on divisive reform proposals. The party's leader says he will step down if the plans are rejected. Plus, will it or won't it? Decision time is approaching for the U.S. Federal Reserve. There are concerns a rate hike could send the world economy into a tailspin. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 16th of September. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the US reaction to North Korea's latest flurry of threats against it. The White House says Pyongyang would be irresponsible to make good on its pledge to hold missile and possibly even nuclear tests. Connie Kim reports.
Referring to the latest possible provocations, the United States continues its call for North Korea to refrain from actions that aggravate regional tensions. White House spokesman Josh Earnest said Tuesday that Washington will not accept North Korea as a nuclear state, calling on Pyongyang to focus on fulfilling international obligations and commitments. Earnest emphasized Washington will continue to cooperate with the members of the six-party talks, enabling the North to carry out its promise made during the talks in 2005 when Pyongyang pledged to end its nuclear weapons program. The White House's remarks follow Pyongyang's warning it would use its nuclear weapons should the U.S. and its allies continue making hostile comments about North Korea. Adding to concerns, the reclusive regime hinted on Monday of another possible rocket launch in the near future. The White House view was also echoed by U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell on the same day. Russell said it would be a mistake if North Korea conducts a nuclear or missile test, as it would set back the regime's hopes to grow its economy and end its isolation. Russell stated that Pyongyang can get what it wants, such as economic growth, security, and respect, if it takes the right path and makes the right decisions. As much as the U.S. is calling on the North to refrain from provocations, South Korea is also raising its voice for North Korea's denuclearization. Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol has stressed that in accordance with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, North Korea must abandon all its existing nuclear programs in a complete, verifiable, and irreversible manner. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, with North Korea continuing to make its aggressive overtures towards the U.S., the South Korean military is intensifying surveillance, particularly at sea. Military sources in Seoul say an Aegis destroyer has been given an official command to detect possible ballistic missile launches. One destroyer is currently deployed in the East Sea. One additional Aegis is set to be deployed if military activities in the north show a launch is imminent. A multifunctional radar built on all four sides of the Aegis destroyer can detect ballistic missiles 1,000 kilometers away and can also simultaneously track 1,000 flying targets within a 500-kilometer range. President Park Geunhye is set to attend the UN General Assembly in New York City next week. In a statement, the Presidential Office of Cheongwade said Wednesday that President Park will present a keynote speech at the UN summit for the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda that will happen on September 26th. Participating nations are expected to adopt the so-called 2030 agenda for sustainable development. President Park will make another keynote address at the 70th UN General Assembly on September 28th. There, she's expected to deliver South Korea's stance on such issues as peace and security, human rights, and sustainable growth. Korea's main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is set to decide on whether it will implement internal reform initiatives amid deepening factional strife within the party. The NPAD will hold an executive meeting this afternoon where lawmakers plan to vote on the measures, which include adopting a new nomination process ahead of next year's general elections. Moon Jae-in, the head of the party, is trying to consolidate his position as leader while silencing non-mainstream members who are deeply opposed to the proposed reforms. Now, minority factions suspect the party's mainstreamers, led by Moon, are trying to use the reforms to further their own political agenda. Moon Jae-in said last week that he would step down if the party rejected the reform plan. Lawmakers from Korea's ruling Saenuri Party have decided to push ahead with 5 major revisions to bills related to labour reform. The legislation includes revisions to the Labour Standards Act, Employment Insurance Act and the Act on the Protection of Fixed-Term and Part-Time Employees, among others. With the revisions, the ruling party says it hopes to shorten employees' working hours. It also says the changes will shore up the Employment Insurance Act and prolong the terms of fixed-term and part-time contracts. The changes are aimed at making Korea's rigid labour market more flexible. President Park Geunhye will donate 20 million won, roughly $17,000 of her own money to a fresh fund aimed at creating more jobs for young people. This was announced by Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn in a meeting with cabinet ministers on Wednesday morning. Hwang said President Park will also give 20%, 1/5 of her monthly pay to the fund every month, and that he and other ministers will follow suit. The fund, dubbed the Youth Hope Fund, was introduced by the President at Tuesday's cabinet meeting and is expected to be used for running social programs such as tailored training for young job seekers. Now, the world is waiting on the Federal Reserve's decision this week that could raise interest rates in the US for the first time in about a decade. However, with markets still suffering from China's downturn, a growing number of economists are turning to a rate freeze. Kim Min-ji reports.
All eyes are on the U.S. Federal Reserve. Many analysts are shifting to a rate freeze this month from a previous consensus expectations of a rate hike. The U.S. dollar fell to a 3-week low against a basket of major currencies on Monday, which Reuters attributed to investors betting on interest rates staying at their record lows until at least December. Around 46% of economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal in September expected a rate hike, which is down sharply from 82% in August. Barclays also ruled out prospects for a rate hike, with analysts pushing back their call for an increase to March next year.
Raising interest rates for the first time in 11 years is always going to be a big deal when it happens. I think it's unlikely, though, that we are actually going to see it delivered upon this week.
The main concern is that a rate increase could exacerbate the already weak global economy. Some worry it could send further turbulence across global financial markets, already hit by the China shock and Beijing's currency devaluation, and possibly spark a financial crisis. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have also voiced concerns about a global slowdown. They suggest the Fed hold off for the time being. However, some analysts say U.S. economic fundamentals are strong enough to support a rate increase, with a handful of U.S. policymakers saying it's time to align the monetary policy with economic progress.
It's the U.S. actually having to decide whether it is more concerned with its own economy or its position in the world.
As things stand, it's unclear what the decision will be. If the Fed decides to make its move, it would bring an end to its loose monetary policy in place since the 2008 global financial crisis and signal that the Fed is confident the U.S. economy is on the right track. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, with rising labour costs during the first 6 months of the year, profitability for Korea's top 30 conglomerates has fallen on the back of an economic slowdown. According to data compiled by corporate researcher CEO Score, the company's net profit dropped $1.6 billion in the January to July period, down 6.4% from last year. Sales also fell 7.9% and operating income edged down 0.8% over the same period. Now, total labour costs rose 4.7% from last year to $28.4 billion. With this, the portion of wages to total sales came to 5.9%. That's up 0.7 of a percentage point from 2014. It has emerged that the children of Korean conglomerate owners held nearly 100 billion Korean won, just over 81 million US dollars in stocks. According to data from the Fair Trade Commission, 39 children from 15 business groups own $81.4 million in stocks. Big business owners often transfer their stocks to their offspring through donations and trusts. Among the conglomerates, GS Group topped the list with 6 children holding over $60 million worth of stocks. They were followed by a child from the KCC Corporation family and 3 from the Doosan Group. Hungary has declared a state of emergency and introduced new laws that have shut its borders to refugees. To the growing influx of refugees, a Europe without borders appears to be no more. Son Jung-in has the latest.
Hundreds of refugees are stranded on the Serbian side of the Hungarian border, one of their main routes into Western Europe. They were blocked by Hungarian police after Budapest declared a state of emergency and shut the border. The country has implemented harsh new rules for anyone attempting to enter illegally. Frustrated refugees staged a sit-in protest.
We are staying here for a hungry strike. We'll not move of this point to arrive to Vienna. We want to arrive to Vienna.
Serbia, which is not a member of the European Union, has urged Hungary to reopen its crossing points, warning that it will not accept anyone turned back from the border. Romania, which shares a border with Hungary, has also criticized its plan to put up a wire fence along parts of the border to stop asylum seekers looking for alternative ways to enter its territory. Amid the escalating crisis, Germany and Austria have called for an emergency EU summit to address the situation.
It's the responsibility of the entire European Union, and that's why we agreed to have a special EU summit next week.
This as many desperate people continue to risk their lives and make the dangerous crossing across the Mediterranean Sea in an effort to reach Europe. At least 22 refugees, including 4 children, died on Tuesday when their boat capsized off the coast of southwestern Turkey as they were trying to reach Greece. 3 days earlier, at least 34 refugees were killed when their overcrowded boat sank in the same area. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his ruling Liberal Democratic Party are aiming to pass a slew of unpopular security bills in the coming days that will enable Japan to send combat troops into action overseas. Public opposition to the bills is mounting by the day, but it's looking increasingly likely that their efforts will be in vain. Lee Soo-eun reports.
Student, businessman, or mother, it didn't matter. Some 50,000 protesters, furious with the Abe administration's defense legislation, gathered round the Japanese parliament building with placards emblazoned with messages like "No war, down with Abe," and "Give peace a chance."
I came because all I care about is peace between Asian nations, and I think the security bills don't produce that.
11 new security bills, if enacted, will allow Japanese troops to fight overseas for the first time since World War II, even if its territory is not under attack. Nobel Prize winner Kenzaburo Oe says post-war pacifist Japan will be history if the legislation goes through.
Our constitution of peace will no longer exist.
Public opposition to the bills is growing as the vote moves ever closer. The leaders of Japan's main opposition parties have been extremely vocal in their resistance to Abe's attempt to unilaterally push the bills through parliament.
We'll not sit by and watch him ram the bill though. We'll do anything to stop it.
However, Abe and the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, which has a majority in the Diet, have signaled that they want the legislation approved within this week. They say it's necessary to deal with the unstable security conditions in Northeast Asia posed by North Korea. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Now, with Chuseok, one of Korea's biggest holidays, just over 1 week away, consumers are being warned of the dangers of smishing. Smishing is a method of fraud where text messages containing a link to a fraudulent website or phone number are sent in an attempt to hack into people's phones. The Financial Supervisory Service says a smishing message has begun doing the rounds. It reads, "Package delivery may not be successful," and it contains a link to connect consumers to a fake mobile banking service. It may also hack into their personal information. The FSS warning is timely, as before packages arrive in Korea, delivery service providers generally text the receiver to let them know it's on the way. Well, those are the stories we've been following on this Wednesday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com and also a smartphone application. You can just search for Arirang TV. Have a great day. Goodbye.